So I'm in a new folder that I named Dynamically Update a Paragraph, and I've got an empty index.html file and an empty script.js file. So in index.html, I'll press the exclamation mark and the tab key to get the boilerplate, the starter HTML file. And here I'll just type script, enter, and then inside src equals script.js so that I can have my script.js file access this index.html file right here. I'll save all. And now let me start by discussing how do we hook the input element with some JS code inside the script tag. There are a few ways to do it, but let's go with using the onchange attribute in the HTML. So I'll add just under the body element an input tag, type text, and I'll set its ID to user input. The onchange attribute allows us to run a function inside our script tag. For example, I'll add onchange and I'll set it equal to update paragraph. And of course, this update paragraph has a pair of parentheses, so that means it's an invocation to a function. That also means that now I need to add that function right here. So I'll type function update paragraph, and I'll just console.log something for now. I'll make sure that all my changes are saved, and now I can preview this by pressing the Go Live here because I'm using the live server extension in VS Code. And once I press it, I get the link to it, so I can open it right here. And I'll also press Ctrl-Shift-I to open the DevTools. I'll organize my DevTools a little bit so that it's showing the console. I'll hide this thing here. Press Ctrl-L to clear the console. So now we're all set up. Let me zoom in into the input a little bit. So that's it. So now when I type something here, nothing happens, but the onchange event will trigger when I press the enter key. So whenever I do that, I'll get the word something logged to the console. So that means that my code is working. Next, I'll make this better so that instead of logging out stuff to the console, I'll log the actual characters the user types in. To do that, I need to grab the value of the input field and store it into a JS variable. A traditional way to target an element in HTML with JavaScript is with the ID attribute. So here's how it works. You add an ID attribute to a piece of HTML that you want to work on with JS, and then you use JavaScript's built-in getElementById method of the document object. Practically, that means that I'll target the user input ID as follows. So I have the document object, then I'm accessing the getElementById method on the document object, and finally I'm specifying the user input as the ID, which of course exists right here in this input, and that's how I access the input element, this one right here. However, to be able to use it again and again, I'll need to store this in a variable. So I'll type let user text equals document.getElementById and passing in the string value of user input to the getElementById function invocation. Now that we can Now I can console log the value of user text whenever the update paragraph is run. Here's my update. I'm accessing the value of this input element with the .value property. And I'll save it again. This will refresh with a live server. And I'm typing something. And now I'll press the enter key and something will be logged to the console. I can also change this to other thing, or really anything else that I can think of, and it will show that word in the console as well. Now I'll update the DOM with the value of the input field. So I'll inject the user-generated text from the input field into the DOM, specifically into a p tag. So here's the update in the index.html file, where I'll add a p tag, and I'll type dynamically update this paragraph. And I'll set this p tag's ID attribute to the value of dynamic paragraph. Save my changes, and that's the update right here. So now let me see what happens when I replace the console log with something more meaningful. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do document.getElementById. Then I'll paste in the dynamic paragraph ID attribute value, and I'll set the inner HTML of this paragraph to user text. Control S to save my changes, and let's see what that does to my app. So if I type hello there and I press the enter key, the p tag gets updated with the value of the input field. Now I'll further improve this little application by displaying previous user-generated text using an array. First, I'll actually make a mistake in my code so that you can sort of get additional insight into how this thing works. So anyway, to display the history of the user input, we'll use an array. So let me start with an empty array. I'll type let message history, and I'll set it to an empty array. Now, whenever the update paragraph function is run, I want to push the current value that exists in the input into this array. So I'll basically do this after setting the array. Message history dot push, and I'll pass it the value of user text. Of course, I need to move that down a little bit. So I'll move it here, and additionally, now I'll update the inner HTML, change it from user text to message history. I'll press Ctrl S to save my changes, give it another try here, and this works, but it does not seem to be pushing into the array. And to confirm that that is the case, I'll type msg history, or actually, let's do it the other way around. And to make sure that that is the case, I'll type console.log msg history. I'll press Ctrl S, and let me try again. So now the value of the message history array is A. If I type B, it becomes AB. If I type C, it becomes ABC. The reason why this is happening is because I'm setting the value of message history to an empty array whenever I run the update paragraph function. And there's a really easy fix for this issue. Thing is, the message history array should not be updating whenever I'm running the update paragraph. So I'll just move it out. This way, the message history is in the global scope, outside the scope of the update paragraph function. So when the update paragraph function looks for the message history value, it won't be able to find it here, and then it will look up the scope chain, find it outside of itself in the global scope, and then work with this array. The reason this works is because now we are not resetting the value of the message history array every time we're running the update paragraph function. And essentially what that does is it keeps the values that already exist in the message history updated, or in other words, the value of the message history array is not reset by the update paragraph function. So I'll Control S to save this and give it a try. A, then let's say AB, then let's say ABC. So you see now all of these values become separate items in the dynamic paragraph array. Finally, there are a few more things that I would like to add to this dynamically update the paragraph application, and that is basically adding, for example, a clear to automatically clear the input. So I'll do that by adding the following code right here. So I'm setting the user text, and then after the user text is set, I'll just do document.getElementById user input, or actually user input dot value equals an empty string, and that will reset the input here. So let me save this and give it a try. A, B, ABC, something else, and my input keeps on resetting to be empty whenever the onchange event fires. Next, to improve my app a little bit more, I'll add a space character between each of the user inputs. To do that, I'll just update this message history push by adding a simple space character and concatenating it to the value of the user text. So now I'll press Control S, and this will refresh my app. So now I'll type hello there, what is up? And that completes this lesson on working with dynamically updating a paragraph from an input element in vanilla JavaScript.